Greg Lane with Low Volume Lean. In this video, I want to take just a few minutes to discuss how we need to assess some measurements differently in high mix, low volume. Now, we tend to have all the different measurements under cost, quality, and delivery as any high volume organization, but there's some that we have to treat differently, and therefore some different methodologies apply. And three of the key ones that are different would be our lead time. Our lead time can tend to be longer than somebody that's building to a finished goods inventory, and have a lot more steps in our processes that have to be evaluated. Our fixed cost structure can tend to be higher proportionally and take some different methodologies to make improvements and get rid of some of the non-value added in our fixed cost. And finally, our inventory has to be treated differently because our inventory structure is very different. So let's explore each of these very quickly in just a bit more detail. So if we talk about lead time has a lot less to do in operations in our business. For example, if we look at a traditional flow through, after the quotation, we'll have an order, technical resolution, cleaning up the bill of materials possibly. We finally have purchasing, ordering from our suppliers. We generally have a longer supply or lead time. Our suppliers don't keep product on hand for us because of our lower volumes. And we have a planning, scheduling phase. And if we look at that order fulfillment, that's really our operations time. And we, of course, have some packing, logistics, and so forth, and finally get around invoicing. But if we look at that, all those processes, and if you just imagine that they're proportional to their actual lead time, the way they're drawn, you see that the operations part is not our key focus on lead time. Therefore, we need some different methodologies, and they are available to go in and take some of the non-value added out, some of the lead time out in each of those processes. And those involve some methods that I tend to call the diary method to help locate our bottlenecks, some process flow mapping methodologies that help us to resolve and take out some of the non-value added. Moving on to our fixed cost structure. Our fixed cost structure is proportionally more significant in these high mix, low volume businesses. And if we look at a proportional pie of our, let's say, our complete selling price broken down, we'll have a lot of companies that will have their materials in the 50% range, maybe ranging 30 to 50% of their final selling price is what the cost of the raw materials and purchase parts are. Here it's only shown as about a 30% chunk. The direct labor in a lot of your companies, if you don't know what the direct labor accounts for as a percentage, that's quite an interesting figure because a lot of lean likes to focus on direct labor. We in these businesses need to focus a little more on indirect labor. Most organizations I work with, direct labor will make up anywhere between 7 and 20% of their selling price. And that can leave you up to 50% or at least 30% of your final selling price in all these other fixed costs. So you see some examples in the pie on this slide, your maybe corporate overhead, some of your sales and marketing costs, freight costs, work in process inventory, training, product development, your administration, indirect people in the shop. All those kind of indirect costs are where we need tools and methodologies, and they are available to go in and look at those processes, take some of the non-value added out, take some of the lead time out, which is whatever is most important in your strategy. Moving quickly, let's just talk about inventory for a minute, because although inventory is a very strong focus in both high volume and low volume organizations, in the lower volume high mix organizations, the inventory is a little different. Basically, we don't have finished goods inventory, and we don't use that as a management technique. We don't use finished goods inventory to hide some of our other system inefficiencies and keep our lead time down or keep our on-time delivery high. We don't have that option. But we do have some options with our raw materials, though our raw materials have much more random usage because we're not a high volume manufacturer, meaning we have a lot higher deviation and standard deviations among the usage. though there are tools in the high mix, low volume toolbox to analyze that and get a better handle on how to manage that. And that's something to work through with supply chain management and purchasing. But there are ways to improve the handling of our raw materials and purchase parts that are different. Our work in process is also more complicated because we have a higher proliferation of part numbers, meaning we could have thousands of different parts moving through. And a higher volume plant will generally not have that type of part proliferation. Therefore, we need some methods to analyze kind of our runners, repeaters, strangers, and then there's different methods in terms of con-whip or continuous work in process we can use for certain types of runner parts. So again, some different methods apply here. Finally, we have more businesses affected by seasonality. A lot of lower volume producers are producing specialty products, and those have different seasons to them. And then we find ourselves balancing our capacity to the season. We're carrying more inventory in the off season. But again, we do have some ideas and methodologies there. So the important point here is, although we focus on all the same measurements, these are three that take a bit of a different focus and some different tools. So finally, what could be the next steps prior to leaving this website? Well, one of the first might be is to go to the download page, and there, out of many of the publications I've done, I've chosen a few random articles to put that might give you a few bits of knowledge, so that you might select the ones that are worth reading over. Next, you might look into some of the books that are a little more specialized into the high mix, low volume. The first one I would talk about is a book that introduces some of the tools that are specialized for high mix, low volume, kind of an introduction book, but it gives you a flavor for how some of the tools are different, and that's called Made to Order Lean. As we all know in the lean community, the tools approach is very limited and has to be complemented by changing the culture. Less than a third of the transformations that have been surveyed actually sustain results for a number of years. So Culturally on Plan is a book I've written that's very practical and pragmatic. It's a methodology I've developed and piloted for years in a number of organizations, and has been successful at adapting some individual traits and behaviors in line with the strategies in those organizations. And the traits and behaviors are what make up the culture of the organization. And the ones most important to change are the ones that are blocking you from reaching your breakthroughs in your strategic objectives. Therefore, we need a good strategy, well deployed. And from there, we can identify traits and behaviors to meet that strategy, and Culturally on Plan will then take you through how to pragmatically start to adjust some of those in various individuals. Finally is a book called Mr. Lean Buys and Transforms a Manufacturing Company, which is my true story of buying a small job shop in Silicon Valley, California, and transforming that. This not only deals with technical methods that we needed to employ, but also some of the management issues affecting the company. Some of those even touch on items like lean accounting or activity-based costing, and how that really helped turn into a profitable situation by implementing that in a simplified way. You might also look into some additional videos. There's an additional free video on this website, and one of the pages that talks about how tack time can be applied as a principle in these types of businesses, but how the traditional tool and the calculation is not applicable. But a lot of times we have to go back to the principle, and that video explains it. There's also some very inexpensive other videos you can purchase talking about some of the other specialized tools. And finally, you might want to make a no-obligation phone call, or we could do a video call with myself or someone on our staff to discuss your specific situations, what your objectives are, and what experience and methods we have that can profitably help support you there. So we can have a short phone conversation and explore where we might be able to support you further. Thank you for your time.